This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Cyber Frontiers, show number 14, recorded on December 8th, 2014. Here on Cyber Frontiers, we explore cybersecurity and big data and the technologies that are shaping the future, all from an academic perspective. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in Bellevue, Nebraska, and we post the show with world-class show notes out at the AverageGuy.tv. If you have questions, comments, or contributions, you can contact the show. Send us an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv, or you can track me down on Twitter, just @jcollison. And now you can call in those questions as well. We'd love to have you call in that question to us, see if you can stump Christian or Ashton on this. 402-478-8450. If you're driving, don't call that while you're driving. But pull over and give us a call, and we'll play that question right into the program. And now Cyber Frontiers is a part of the Geeks Network. Find the links to this show and many other great podcasts out at thegeeksnetwork.com. And let's introduce the guys tonight, and it's good to see them. Sitting in his dorm room, ready for some Christmas break and coding away right before the show got started, Christian Johnson. Christian, how are you?
I'm awesome. 11 days, and then I'm out of here with finals in the bag and in tow. So everyone's looking forward to that at this point, as am I. I'm also looking forward to getting I got a lot of great feedback from you guys last week on what you thought of exploring big data through the Twitterverse Part 1. So we're sure to come and deliver with Part 2 tonight, so we should have a fun conversation around that.
Yeah, and if you didn't listen to Cyber Frontiers 13, you might want to go back because it will build a little bit on that tonight. And so if you haven't done that, go back Cyber Frontiers 13. And then coming from his General Mills sponsored dorm room, University of Maryland, Ashton Webster. Ashton, how are you?
I'm doing well.
We were just talking in the pre-show that I think either General Mills or one of them have determined they're bringing back Cinnamon Toast Crunch, a favorite of the 90s. You guys, neither one of you probably have ever had Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Not the peanut butter stuff, but the actual Cinnamon Toast Crunch?
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
I've had it before, yeah.
Good enough. It is the staple should be the staple of every college student. And certainly Ashton, we've been watching that. If you go back to the very beginning of Cyber Frontiers, it was just one. I think that first time we had you on, I think that's from 3 or 4, right? One box?
Yeah, well, I was like, oh, I don't want it to be in frame, so I was like trying to shift the computer. And we had just started putting them on the wall.
Yeah.
And now I think we have a lot.
That's
I
good.
think we have like 30 or something.
That's good. Well, by the end of the year, you'll have that whole
the whole wall, hopefully,
filled up in there, right? So, well, Christian, you had in response to me saying I wanted to do something like this last week as well. You tried to dumb this down to my level, I think, so that even I could do this. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talk about what you've done, the post, and some of those things, and I'll get links out there.
Sure. So if you go out to front page of cyberfrontierlabs.com, the link will be in the show notes. I put on our site a post for exploring big data through the Twitterverse, and that is kind of the bootstrap starter kit that will get you launched into basically the end goal of where we were our last podcast, right? So in our last podcast, we talked about how to get connected to Twitter, how to start streaming, those tweets in real time, and how to do some very basic manipulations of them. So I cleaned that up a little bit and packaged it out so you can go and get the download and just click that link and import that zip file into Eclipse, and that'll get you all set up right in your workbench. All you'll have to do from that point is put in your API keys from your Twitter account, and you'll be able to get going relatively quickly. So I've also put some other links for kind of the Part 2 stuff that we'll be talking tonight. There's some other people on the internet who have had some cool projects like this related to Twitter, so you can go ahead and do those as a coding challenge if you already have a data sandbox of your own set up. And of course, if not, then stay tuned to what we're doing because we're rebuilding it on this show.
Christian, so my plan was I've got a Windows Server 2012 R2 instance up and running. I got Hyper-V on it. Can I just create a Windows instance in Hyper-V and install this stuff there and just run it off that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could put in a VM. Eclipse runs on, it's cross-platform, so Mac, Windows, Linux, and as long as you have Java installed, then you're good to go. So shouldn't do anything negative to your computer, to say.
Running on Windows 10, can I use? I've got a Windows 10 preview out there. You think that'll work?
Yep.
Okay.
No problem.
Shot. We'll start after the show. Maybe not today, but maybe this weekend. I'll start trying to put that together, and make it work.
Sure.
All right. What next?
Well, I think we're going to circle to Ashton first, because what Ashton basically did was take part one and put it into Storm and did some processing. So I'm going to turn the reins over to him here.
Yeah, so let me start by sharing my screen, and I have a little diagram that I just threw together that hopefully gives an idea of what we got going on here. Let's see. Made this in the great PowerPoint. So let's put this up. Hopefully this doesn't. I don't know if you guys can still see this. I can't see you anymore.
Yeah, no, you're fine. It's looking good.
It's black for me. All right, well that didn't work. Anyway, we have the starting point obviously is Twitter. And as we talked, all right, there goes PowerPoint. Well, anyway, the starting point is Twitter, and as we mentioned last week, the way that works is it takes just a sample of all the tweets that are currently. I'm not sure exactly how it determines what the random sample is, whether that's like a chronologically based thing or if it's like the last 10 seconds, but it grabs some sample of that, and that's where the fun starts. So taking that, what I did is I passed that along to, well, in order to get that, first of all, you have to use the API keys. So apparently Christian set up a way explaining how to get those. It's not super complicated. You just need a way of getting access to this data, and that's what those keys provide you. So if you register an application with Twitter, they'll let you have one of those, and that gives you access to get this random sample. So from there, I'm sending that data through the program that Christian wrote last week. I don't know if you had a chance to see that, but essentially all it does is it makes this call to the Twitter API to get that random sample, and then it just continually feeds that stream to a listener, and that listener can do whatever arbitrary code that you leave there. He was printing out, I think you had a geolocation program set up there. I just fed that to a queue. So that's a service running, it's called Apache Kafka, and it just temporarily holds the data and allows multiple different nodes to access it. So this is all done locally, but if I had so desired, I could have had a whole bunch of nodes running Storm accessing this queue. And now the next logical question is, what is the Storm bar we're looking at here? Well, what that is the distributed application that we're using to process the streams coming from Twitter. So each individual function can be run on a different node on this cluster that we have, and they're processed independently, so they all run at the same time, and it allows for really good throughput, and really it scales very well. So the main processing happening there is taking the stream of random tweets and breaking them into the individual characters in those tweets, and then counting those so that we have a distribution of the most frequently seen characters in tweets. Those are then stored in a database. It's stored in MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database, which is really fun to use. If you've never had a chance, just like look at it and you'll be like, wow, this is really simple and fun to use. But I digress. That's where the data is temporarily stored, and then we have the website where we're showing the graph of that. And that's what you may have caught a glimpse of as PowerPoint was falling apart for me. This is the end. Oh, this is the end. Is it gone now? Okay. This is the end product of all of that hard work. It's a graph, not of company performance. I forgot to change the title of it. It's a graph of the frequency of different characters.
Bad company performance, if it was.
Yeah, I know. It should be labeled as something more like frequency of characters in tweets. So it's in concept it should have been probably E. It ended up as the quotation mark. The reason for that was instead of taking the text of the tweet, I converted the tweet into a JSON file format. And what that is essentially a sort of like XML if you've ever used that. It's a format of storing data, and it has a lot of quotation marks in it to define the fields. And that's not what I meant to do. I should have just gotten the text of the tweets instead. But ignoring that, it's more or less what you would expect to see. I think there are some other field-related. The colon is another artifact of the JSON representation, but you get the idea that this could, be used to get an idea of the most frequent characters in tweets. And what I wish I had done actually was do the most frequent words, because I feel like that would have gotten a little bit more interesting results. I don't know. I'm guessing it would be something like the or.
I was going to say, don't you think it'd be common, the, and
Yeah.
those
A lot
things?
less frequency. But the fun thing that we were talking about doing last time is, so it's cool to be able to just look at the stuff and it's interesting on its own, but using that to identify sentiment analysis or I don't know, predict buying trends, things like that, would be a lot more powerful use of this. So if you have words and you can identify them as in a list as being positive or negative, then things get a lot more interesting. So that might be the next logical progression of this. But this was just a small example of how things are working here. And I actually have it running right now, so hopefully instead of crashing, when I refresh, you should see a jump from like the most frequent one is at about 24 million. Oh, maybe I don't have it running. All right, never mind. It was updating it live before, and it should be updating live. I actually had to stop because Christian and I were both trying to use the same API keys, and Twitter said, "Oh no, we're going to rate limit you," and because we were requesting the data too frequently. But
which means what? Rate limit. What?
so you only get so many requests so like we were asking for that random sample, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask, I think you get one a second, I want to say, roughly. If you ask for more than 15 in 15 seconds or something like that, it will say, okay, that's enough. That's all you get. And then it just blocks you until that time interval passes. And that's what happened because I was doing it exactly on, so I had just enough. And then
Is it really 1 per second?
It's pretty close to that. Yeah, I think so.
Man, that's
It's
not a lot.
It's not actually 1 per second. It's something. It's more like it comes out to that, but it's more like 50 in 50 seconds or something like that.
I don't know, because I feel like when I watch tweets printing to my console that it's faster than 1 second, but
Oh no. It's not one tweet. It's one query to the API, which returns multiple tweets.
Right.
Oh, and one other thing that's kind of cool is there's this graphical representation of what's going on at Storm. So Storm is that middle layer that's doing the actual processing of the stream and converting it into the individual characters and counting those and all that stuff. That they have a user interface for that, and you can see all this interesting stuff about how frequently it's emitting information and transferring it and what the latency is between the nodes and all that stuff. But I think this graph is kind of cool as well. It's each of these circles is a point of processing. So it comes out to this what's called a directed acyclic graph, which is a fancy way of saying the corners of this are points of processing and the edges are the streams of data moving around. And yeah, so this can also, I think this one also has like the thickness of these streams shows how many objects are in them, so it's helpful for debugging what's going on there.
So Ashton, talk a little bit about what the queue is in Storm and why that is a requirement from kind of buffering the streaming tweets into Storm as a data storage.
So last week I did not use the queue, and it kind of worked. The reason that it makes things a lot easier is, one, there's a lot of integration with queues in Storm, especially the Apache Kafka queue, I think because Storm is an Apache project, Kafka is the Apache queue project, and they fit well together. The reason why I think there's a push for that is Storm really wants to consume. Like you say, each of these corners takes a look at the previous point and tries to get data from it, and the starting point is very well suited to grab something from a queue instead of trying to generate the data itself. So last week I was trying to have the queries made from the spout, which is the first point of processing, or bolt, and then immediately have it do things with that, which is like a push operation, because each time it gets data, do something, when in fact it's much better suited to like asking, hey, do you have data for me, getting the data, and then doing operations on it like that as it's ready. So that's what the queue is, that buffer of not like forcing data upon you. You consume, and then there's things that produce to it. It also allows multiple nodes to have access to that same buffer. So if you have several virtual machines on different machines, or different machines, they can all access that queue and get different chunks from it, and it just speeds things up dramatically.
Gotcha.
So hopefully that kind of gives an explanation. It doesn't really work if you don't use the queue, in fact.
So you kind of first I need a rating on a scale of 1 to 10 on how understandable was my toolkit that I gave you. Was it plug and play? Because we're looking for plug and play.
It was really easy.
Okay.
The hardest thing,
for you maybe.
Well, for me, I didn't do anything special with what you gave me either. I literally just, one thing, take out your API keys.
Yeah, well, I did on the download. It was just so that you could just get going.
The only thing I added to yours was writing to the queue. That was a hassle, but not because of your code. It was because getting Kafka set up is kind of an ordeal.
Right, for sure.
But I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, it was a 8 on easiness. Then again, like Jim says, I'd spend a good 8 to 10 hours in front of the computer every day probably, so I might be a little biased in terms of the programming side of things, but it was pretty easy to use.
Gotcha. Cool.
So Christian, I have no familiarity with the IDE, and
it's gonna be fine, Jim.
it's going to be some work for me. I'll just admit, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get there, but it's going to be a little bit of work for me.
I mean, the big thing
is Eclipse, by the way, if you want the sneak preview.
Yeah. So you get your source code, you have the import on the left, and if you hit that little green triangle at the top left, it'll play the source code as you got it. So if you drop your API keys and hit play and you see tweets in the bottom, it means good things are happening.
Let's do it.
And you're saying it's that easy once I get the API set up?
Yep. It's plug and play. Plug and chug.
So this is his thing that he showed last week.
Okay.
Hopefully I see some tweets. There were some there before.
Probably buffered, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
we should just do a whole show on you helping me set this up.
Yeah. I have a lot of things running now. Yeah, but it'll try to connect to Twitter, and then we should start seeing tweets.
Right. So, yeah, and I mean your code has some of the Storm stuff in it, but the post I put out online is very clear cut. Yeah, there you go.
There's the tweets, and we won't read those. We won't read those like we did last week.
Yeah. By the way, Christian.
Yes.
Did you have a line? Yeah. Did you just get the English characters with this?
Well, So I changed that from last week, right? So that was one of the things I was going to talk about. So last week, I was trying to narrow tweets by just putting in very generic latitude, longitude ranges that probably weren't all that accurate. So this time around on the toolkit, I just said, give me all tweets that are English, that the users self-identify as speaking English. So that way I don't have to look at foreign languages when I'm doing this stuff.
Yeah, I wish I had put I don't know if you can see this. My code, I have like the next lines are the things that insert to the queue, and I put those outside of the English language thing for reasons unknown even to myself.
I mean, it shouldn't matter.
No, it did. Like if you look at I spent a long time trying to filter out all the Chinese characters that were blinking everything. Because those, it would get one of those on the graph side, and it would be like, what is this? And stop right there.
Right. So, you're still not inside though, are you?
No, I should have moved this inside. I just didn't think of it. I looked at it later, and I was like, oh, well, that would have made my life a lot easier.
Right.
So yeah, English language.
Right. The other ones there that I commented out as like samples are the the get place, get country code if it's the United States. So that's not using a geolocation, right? That's just saying if Twitter knows that you're in the United States, print it out. So that's another interesting way of doing it. I only really care about if it's English. I don't really care beyond that unless I'm doing something particular that's geospatial in nature.
Yeah, I also cut like a good third or 2/3 of your code out just because I didn't really need any of it except for the
yeah,
string.
so I mean that's the whole idea, right? You guys download and take these starter kits and then do what you want with them, right? I mean, this is just to make it super easy for you to be involved with Twitter, and then you can customize it how you see fit. Someday I'm going to run some Godzilla MapReduce program that makes my Python program look sad, and then I'm just going to use machine learning to take over a lot of data sets. It'll be fun. So, ooh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, see, that's a look at like a small sample of the characters I had, and they're all like indecipherable. It's not until
Like
you
the
get to
Matrix.
the more frequent. Like, what are these? There's like a little moon there, or there's like a beer, a solo cup up here. There's all sorts of weird things.
Fascinating.
I don't
Look at
even
that
know
one up there
terminal
that's like a
supported
dragon.
these. Yeah, there's like a sun. This one's a sun and a cloud.
Interesting.
Let's make these really big. These are exciting. Oh, all right. I broke it.
So,
Yeah.
while Ashton succeeded in the challenge, right? The challenge being put one of these things into a big data system. He did only do characters, and I promised words. So I will now deliver words to the masses here. So I'm going to share my screen now and take you to my workbench. So welcome to Flamethrower again. Again, we pretty much dropped right where Ashton was, right? So you should be familiar. I'm not going to re-talk about all this, but I've changed some things even from the I am screen sharing. Okay, good. I changed some things from the toolkit that I put online. So the only major thing is so just to understand this streaming API funny business it's not funny business, it's just business that takes place in this source code uses threading, right? That's the the whole name of the game. So with threads, it's because it's running asynchronously, and like let's say I want to print a report about what's going on after these streaming tweets come in. I can't do that unless I get those threads to close properly and come back to my main thread. So you don't really have to know anything about that, but basically I put this little convention in here in the highlighted region that lets me cut the stream off after a certain number of tweets, which is what I wanted to do for this, right? So that's just there. Everything else is the same here. Move along, nothing to see, right? Great. So what I did here was it's called do the word count report. So this is the code that basically will allow us to do word count in the program itself. And when you look at the output, so I ran this for 20,000 tweets that came out, and it basically maps key value pairs on my consoles. So if you look down here in the console region, these are the words for 20,000 tweets, the frequency of occurrences of how many times these words occurred in those 20,000 tweets. One of the most interesting ones that I managed to find was Coldplay. And so again, remember that this stream that we have access to is 1% of the total Twitter sphere fire hose, right? But if I then take a look at my Twitter feed and see what's going on for that keyword, I do in fact notice that there's a lot of conversation around Coldplay, and I have no idea why. So I don't know if there's like a new album that just came out again, which doesn't seem right, but a lot of people are talking about Coldplay. So maybe their Magic album just got released in another country. I really don't know. But so a lot of people like Coldplay, and we can conclude that. Great. Obviously, there's a lot of, at the very bottom of the tank here, right? The is the most common word, no surprise there, right? But I think the point here is to show you that we can make a lot of filters, right? So we can filter out the, and, or, but, whatever. We can filter out swear words. We can filter out stuff we're not interested in. And we can pare it down just to topics that we're interested so that we can do those higher level analyses that we're talking about. But this is kind of the the proof of concept demo of how one would do this. Now, what you didn't see when I ran this was that it took me about somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes after I collected those 20,000 tweets. I didn't measure the exact time, but I could have the computer do it for me. But it took some time from the time when I collected those 20,000 tweets to the time that it was able to generate this report. And why is that? Because it's basically, not only is it doing all the frequency counts, but then I have to sort it so that it shows me the frequencies from least to greatest. So these are the least occurring. Scroll down, and now you're getting towards the most occurring, right? So that's a sorting algorithm. Any type of sorting algorithm is going to have a efficiency to it. Some are more efficient than others. I picked a default key sorting algorithm for a hash map out of Java, so it's not my own sorting algorithm, but it should be relatively efficient. And so this really kind of gives you an idea of the time that it can take. So this, you can see the scalability is not there, right? If I were to make this 1 million tweets and try and run the same word count report, which seems super simple, right, guys? I mean, we're just counting words and frequencies and sorting it. That seems really trivial to you and me, but when you have, all of a sudden you have 1 million tweets, yeah, guess what? Your one CPU isn't going to be able to do that sorting algorithm. And that's really kind of the first way in which we can see that MapReduce has some power to it, right? Because MapReduce, this is like slicing through cake for MapReduce. It, million words, no problem. It'll have the answer to you out in 30 seconds, as opposed to 30 hours, right? And so that is the reason why a lot of people might ask, why can't I just make a word count report in my application, and why do I need this MapReduce, this Hadoop, all of that? And it's a great question, and the answer is, yeah, you can do all these things at a small scale. It just becomes a question of, at what point do you have too much data for you to be able to do realistic analysis? And the thing to keep in mind is one of the whole takeaways from the big data field is that you only find really interesting analytics and thoughts with having really large data sets, right? That's a basic property of statistics. We don't see trends and patterns until we have a lot of sample points that we can make a conclusion from. Same principle here, except now we're using machines to get millions and millions of points and do analytics on it in, a fraction of the time it would take if you were running a single program. I haven't tried this yet, so it could be a dangerous thing, but I guess we'll go ahead and do this live on the show. So I was looking at this word count report just now and seeing that one of the hashtags that showed up was MTV stars, so that must be another conversation on Twitter. You can go validate for yourself, though. But an interesting feature of the API is for the status, it has this thing called get hashtag entities. And so I was just curious to see if that filtered out the tweets to only give you, oh, didn't like that. Hated that. But the mission here is to try and get the tweets automatic. Oh, it does do it. Interesting. So ignore these errors. Maybe I can make this a little cleaner. So I think it comes back as a JSON response. Yeah, it doesn't like that. No. But the idea here is that there's a feature in the Twitter API, I do believe, that allows you to basically parse each tweet into just giving you back hashtags. So if you really want to look at something that's keyword only based, as opposed to having all the different words that you would word count over, one really, really obvious filter is to only look at words that are hashtags, because those are the words in Twitter that people are going to place the most emphasis on. So I found that pretty interesting, because, again, that is what really allows you to make trends that otherwise you're not going to see. And if you have the time, I would encourage you to actually go ahead and build a filter. It just really doesn't like me. To go ahead and build a filter that does all this custom hand. But I mean, I don't, maybe Ashton, you have some thoughts on this, but some of them are coming out. I don't know why the other ones are giving me out of bounds. Oh, maybe it's because yeah, that would be why. Okay. So maybe now we'll just no. I just can't get lucky on the first try tonight. But these.
Yeah, I don't know. I would go back to the way you had it, but instead of toString, you want to do like get hashtag something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, in my gets, I
Oh,
have.
it's an array. I don't know. This is
Yeah,
not
well, it
live on
comes
there.
it
But
comes back an array. I don't know why the array is not
I don't know.
null in this case, but yeah. So, but I mean, again, just to show you, again, this is not world perfect code as it stands, but if we go type Matt Monday in whatever that is, I'm kind of scared, but here we go. If we type Matt Monday, friends, into Twitter, and give us some font, please. So this is Matt Monday, whatever that means. I don't know what that means. It seems somewhat popular, but as you can see, it correctly took this whole tweet and just grabbed that hashtag. So that can help you very easily see what are popular hashtags floating around in that representative sample. Yeah.
So, I kind of have an idea, but I still would like to ask, what's the difference between something like Storm and something like this Hadoop MapReduce that you
Yeah.
just executed?
I mean, they're both similar in paradigm, right? I think the big difference is how you load it into HDFS, number one. I haven't worked with Storm as much. I mean, you're more the expert on that, but
Yeah.
from what I understand with Storm, the queue is taking care of how it's loading it into its own data storage, whereas with HDFS MapReduce, you're coming up with some mechanism to do that directly. Cloudera, if you look at my post on Cyber Frontier Labs, Cloudera wrote something back in 2012 that was actually very interesting, where they used Apache Flume basically to be. It would take the tweet streams, the Twitter stream, and Apache Flume would basically push it right into HDFS for you, and then it was all ready to go with MapReduce. So it's kind of it's really slicing the egg two different ways.
Yeah.
I would say Storm may be faster at this point.
What I was getting at was the nature of the MapReduce is for it to be you collected 2,000 tweets and then you ran the MapReduce. So that's a batch operation versus I don't know if I was clear on this, but the Storm was working on the stream like as it came in or as it came into the queue at least. So I think I'm not sure that they're actually all that similar in paradigm, except that they can both be distributed and they both can handle big data. But the way that they operate is actually quite different.
Right. Wow, did I just make that rookie of a mistake? That's probably what it was. Yeah, there it was. Wow, you're such a rookie. All right, there we go. So I feel so stupid some days. So now you can see a console that is giving you correct things, right? So believe it or not, these my friends are the hashtags that are floating.
MTV stars.
Yeah, see, so those are the hashtags that are floating around. So you know what, because we're hands-on on Cyber Frontiers, we're gonna show you how one would go about counting these now. So these are hashtags. These are awesome. Everything is awesome. You should watch that movie. It's a great movie. So what we're gonna do is, instead of doing that for word count, so what I did to kind of mimic what MapReduce would be is there's a class in Java called String Builder, which just lets you basically append a bunch of raw strings. So what I do is I take this and, well, first, okay, so if you're a sloppy programmer like me on the fly, on the gun to get this stuff done, you play around a lot. So the first thing we need to do is it's giving us back this whole thing as JSON, and I just want what's inside this text thing, right? So I need to find a way to do that. So what I'm going to do is I am going to make a substring, if it lets me. So,
well, are those not objects or those strings in the
I don't know.
hashtag?
Do you have a faster way of quickly
You try like get hashtag from the from each of those elements?
Oh, well, there you go. Get text, aren't you?
Okay.
See, sometimes you can reinvent the wheel, and then there's other times where you can just listen to Ashton, and everything's going to be fine. So now,
There are probably times where that doesn't work too, but
well, there's a lot of times where it does. So,
I think most of the time you probably get it right, Ashton.
yeah. So all right. So now we're just getting hashtags. Very good. Even without the hashtag in it. Awesome. So now I want to count these words instead of the whole tweets. So these are going to be what I put into my string builder.
Did someone really hashtag question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark?
You know what? I think that's a Unicode
yeah, I think
problem.
that's probably the characters not being converted correctly.
Got
And
it.
I have not figured out how you know ahead of time what Unicode it's going to be. I just haven't gotten that far into the game yet. So let's just try this for 20 and see if it actually works.
For mine, I had to ignore. There was like I did it after the fact, but I like ignored any non-Unicode characters because you actually get a lot, especially like I guess as you could see there were a lot in the database that represent the emojis and Chinese characters and all sorts of
Yeah.
things.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of people talking about MTV stars. So that, if we want to do, and you'll see this in a sec when we get I'm hoping the word count report comes back soon and it doesn't get carried away. But I mean, at a very elementary level, these are the kinds of things that Twitter does and scales for millions of users so that when you log into your Twitter page and you see, what's trending now, it's basically based on these huge data silos where they're doing these very basic things at the core. So if you understand what's happening so there you go. Oh my gosh, that's not what I wanted. Apparently I didn't split right, but again, we saw by visual inspection, as we would say in math, that MTV stars was definitely the number one occurrence here. So that would show up the most. So again,
For your segment, right? Because when I go to Twitter right now and check trending, I don't see MTV stars.
Right, because keep in mind that again, it's 1%.
Right.
It's 1% of data, but even 1% can tell us it might not be the top thing that's trending, but it is something that's trending, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
42 seconds ago, a minute ago, 2 minutes ago. So this is people are talking about this on the minute, which means we did a pretty good job of finding a topic on Twitter that is basically a back and forth conversation, which is a pretty cool thing to be able to do, because if you can do that and then you center the conversation around topics that you're interested in, like cybersecurity, now you can start taking actions on Twitter based on the conversation, and have a program help you do it. So that's kind of this is the word count demo. If we wanted to make this really big, the next step would be to start streaming this into HDFS and really see some larger numbers about how this works.
Christian, do we have any idea what Twitter is using behind the scenes to process this?
Yeah, so they've written to some extent about their architecture. I mean, some of what Twitter, like for example, LinkedIn has a huge Hadoop data cluster. Obviously Yahoo does. So a lot of the like on Amazon, any of your purchases and that kind of thing, when it says this item is recommended for you, that's a Hadoop cluster giving you that result on the fly, which is amazing that it works like that for millions of users at a time. Twitter has some stuff that's using the open source stuff that we all know and recognize. I think they also have some of their own platform that they built that does it very similarly, but it's all kind of based on the same principles at this point.
Yeah, just another observation. I'm looking at the developer pages for Twitter, and for that get sample, because I am curious like what exactly you're getting when you get that random sample.
Right.
And it doesn't speak like it says it is a small. This is literally from their page. I can share my screen, I guess. It says that it's a random sample that is the same for any two people. So that means like if two users make the same, it says the tweets returned by default access level are the same. So if two different clients connect to this endpoint, they will see the same tweets. So just kind of an interesting thing about the way that these streams work is for the public access, at least, you're going to get the same ones as another person doing the queries at the same time.
Right, and I think there's a very interesting post, I got to go back and find it, that I was reading this week, that when a statistician actually looked at the samples and kind of did some interesting analysis to kind of come up with how Twitter was selecting the random, because they claim it's a random sample, but he had some interesting logic that seemed to make sense about how that, quote, random samples actually computed. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, I would be interested to hear that because I'm curious as to how random it actually is.
Yeah, I mean, I got to imagine that, there's obviously it's not going to know 100% what it gives back to you, but it's all, everything is a formula, right? So
yeah, and I think Jim also brought up a good point about like what trending actually means, because it may not just be raw occurrence of.
I mean, it seems
Is it just
some of it I don't think is, but like for example, yeah, so like the trends rotate, but for example, when we were broadcasting live during the Ferguson indictment news, I mean, it was Ferguson, #Ferguson was just right at the top, right? So it must weigh pretty heavily on if something is just blowing up, it hones in on it pretty fast.
was that the letter count?
Yeah, I don't know why that did letters instead of words. It's just
You
losing me.
split.
I split on this. Yeah, I have to keep playing with it, but
Yeah.
I mean, you saw the point, right?
I'm wondering what the time interval for. I would be interested to try and like reverse engineer the trending thing because I don't know whether the time interval is like the last, second, the top number of tweets with that hashtag per second or per hour. I mean, there's probably somewhere between those two, obviously, but I don't know. It'd be an interesting experiment to try and like guess at that.
Yeah, and I mean, I did a little research too because I was curious on like how many data developers really can get access to the full fire hose, and it's super tough, man. I mean,
Really?
there are only 4 companies who had access to the fire hose, and one of them was bought back by Twitter later. So there's really only 3 independent ones, and I was reading a lot of interesting things about how like having access to the fire hose can be really useful for stuff like law enforcement and whatnot, and so. I bet you there are some premium customers that are paying. The three companies that have access to the fire hose are probably then going back and selling pieces of the fire hose to people. So it's, who gets what.
Yeah, I wonder how that works.
I mean, I have no idea to be honest, but it was interesting to say the least. Because I mean, that's not a problem. If you want the real meat and potatoes of everything that's going on, that's like. Twitter's not the only one that excludes that. I've had huge problems with getting like LinkedIn. They have this vetted API search that if you have some parameters lets you pull back people's profiles really easily. Yeah, guess what? Only like 10 companies have access to that vetted API program, and they'll just reject you because they feel like it, not because you didn't meet the qualifications, but because it has to be. You have to justify it to be in the interest of LinkedIn as a business. Growing and moving forward for you to have access to this, and there's not many people out there that can make that argument successfully. So,
Chris, you want to drop your screen share?
Yeah.
Do you know if LinkedIn has? I think LinkedIn might have the Twitter Firehose access because when I was looking, there was a similar project that they had done. I think I posted a link to it on the last one. I can post it again. Because it's sort of similar to what I did. They use Kafka. They use don't know if they use Storm. They use something called Voldemort instead of the database I used. And they were saying that like in their code they had queries for the fire hose. So I wonder if they have it. It wouldn't necessarily surprise me, but
yeah, I mean it's. Yeah. They all rely on one another, kind of sharing a certain amount of data at this point. So.
Yeah. So you were saying that one of the tenets of using MapReduce is HDFS, which stands for Hadoop Distributed File System.
Highly distributed
file system. And so that's where you were doing your. Was that yours is based on that, right?
Well,
because what
yeah.
I'm saying is mine. I didn't use that at all for mine, but there are plugins to HDFS like databases that sit on top of it, like Hive, which I had spoken a little bit about before. For we were going to do some research into the IP address, the IPv4 space, but
Right.
there's actually ways that we could connect what we're doing is what I'm really getting at. So they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. This is sort of the real-time processing end with Storm, and Hadoop's sort of the post-processing warehouse that you have, and they can interact through HDFS. So if I could write, instead of writing my data to MongoDB, maybe write it to Hive, which sits on top of Hadoop, on top of HDFS. Essentially, getting the data from the real-time processing to HDFS would allow us to merge our efforts here. That's kind of the missing link between ours.
Right. Right. Yeah. No. Definitely. And
So you kind of have that like pre-processing with Storm feeding into HDFS, and then you can pick that right up and do the batch jobs with, those large samples of tweets that you're saving from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that's one of the cool things about the way the Hadoop ecosystem evolved was that now there's just so many different ways to get at the same thing. It really just depends on, do you want to process in real time? Do you want to process buffered? How do you want to control the metadata? And that's why the customizability is cool, but it's also made, in infinite different ways to solve some of these problems that, then we ask ourselves questions about, well, which one of these ways is actually the best way to do it? And, well, I don't really know.
Yeah, I really like the diagram. We had showed it before. We've spoken about HDFS kind of a lot, but the diagram that I like is like you have HDFS sitting on the bottom, and then all of these applications that can interact with it, of which MapReduce is just one now. There's all those other ones like, I think there's Hive, there's HBase, there's Pig, there's all sorts of things now.
Right, and I mean, being honest, at this point, we are at a point where it is a very large ecosystem. I mean, if we were talking about this back in like 2010, I would maybe hesitantly call it an ecosystem, but I mean now it's just the horse has long left the barn. Surprisingly enough, though, you would be amazed for all the new generation, data analytics platforms that we talk about on this show. Like I think it's like 90% or so of production big data platforms for these large companies still use Hadoop version 1.0 with MapReduce 1.0, and
Wow.
those applications just do what they're supposed to when they're supposed to, and so they don't want to touch it or change it. And I mean, I don't blame them, because can you imagine even jumping from Hadoop 1 to Hadoop 2, how much changed, how much rewriting would have to be done? So
yeah. I mean, it's obviously it's going to lag behind because it takes time to integrate these things, and once you have them, if it works, there's not necessarily huge motivation to get the best thing unless you have a specific need for it.
Yeah, I mean,
Let me,
I got to imagine that they are at this point, just if they want something new on a new platform, they're building an entire platform separately of what their existing production is, and just keeping them totally isolated until they can switch over seamlessly.
Yeah, this is what I was kind of talking about. You have the Hadoop file system down here. So is it? Yeah, that's. Is it Highly or Hadoop? I don't know. It's.
Oh well.
So anyway, they have the Yarn sitting on top of that, and then all of these different categories of programs that plug in here. This is for the Hortonworks sandbox, I think is. This is kind of an example of it, but I like this diagram to kind of have an idea of those layers.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I was thinking if we could have actually Storm's right here with the streaming. If we could have Storm doing the insert, let's say with our example of tweets doing the insertion here, and then you can have lots of other things plug into this data with SQL queries using Hive, and I think I don't have HBase here, but I think that's also one of the ones that does that. Oh no, it's NoSQL. Okay, here it is.
Right.
And then all those different things that plug in there. Spark for the in-memory processing.
Yeah, and that's another.
Explore some of those.
Yeah, and that's another big thing that's changed the space at this point, right? I mean, now just this notion of NoSQL being a stack of different ways of taking what was, you know, every traditional database admin knows SQL really well. They can do these SQL queries, and now with NoSQL, they kind of lose that. But we've given things like Hive in that SQL package, a way for you to take what is unstructured and still be able to, for those guys who live in that very relational database world, to still be able to interface with these systems is very interesting. Not to mention just the level of enterprise maturity that these systems have finally taken on is very interesting, especially with Hadoop 2.4 supporting enterprise-grade Kerberos and all these different authentication mechanisms. Whereas the original Hadoop, no one was thinking about how to make this an enterprise-ready authentication-based service for people. And obviously, once it took off, that was stuff that they had to kind of go back and figure out in the context of what had been built. So I mean, I think it's pretty interesting that we have done that at this point, and that it's now kind of part of the offering, right? Whoever can have the best enterprise setup, not just the best data analytics, is really part of the game as well.
Yeah, it's been cool to with just being involved with work, and also with our the things that we do here, being able to see these grow. Like I think I mentioned before that a lot of these are just becoming top-level Apache projects, and they're getting like more and more widespread. Like you hear about, I think I saw for the first time a company that asked for Storm experience, which I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
So that's cool, and it was like, oh, this is gonna catch on, and this is being used now. It does lag behind when they're actually, the most up-to-date versions, but it's good to see that they're being adopted now.
Well, and I mean, I still kind of wonder where the market, how long the market keeps going down this line of where we've gotten, which is we've hired a ton of professionals around, even just really simple things like, Hadoop has been part of the skill set, so to speak, for, I would say at least 2 years now, probably more, that I've seen a lot of postings out on the internet for, that will say specifically must be able to do these types of things in Hadoop with, these types of, capabilities. And so it'll be interesting to see what other names make it to that level of standing besides Hadoop, for sure.
Yeah, I think some more as counterparts to those, the real-time processing with, I mean, not to keep pitching Storm, but there's other ones that work well in conjunction with the Hadoop file system that all of these are plugging into.
Yeah, I mean, Spark is the big one, I think, right?
Yeah.
Being able to do in-memory transactions probably
that's pretty cool.
is a game changer for systems that are running, a terabyte of DDR4 memory. That's pretty cool.
I mean, I've always liked the analogy of, like, if it's in memory, then it's in the room. If it's on disk, it's like it being in the moon for the computer. Like
Right.
that's the difference in retrieval times practically.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think as systems become more, I mean, we've already gotten the cost analysis curve of where we've gone with memory in these big HPC computing systems. I mean, I think Spark will continue to gain popularity as that price point goes down, because it makes, the whole thing that makes Spark what it is having memory. So there's a lot of, Teradata is another company that seems to come to mind, or Terracotta, I don't remember the exact name, but
no, it's Teradata. I'm pretty sure it's Teradata.
Yeah, I mean, they were a potential customer back when I was working at NASA, and they were in memory space long before public offerings kind of came out for things like Spark. And I mean, we looked at it very seriously because of just the the differences in times that it can offer is substantial. And even though we have things like SSDs to make disks faster, we're not using SSDs for large data sets, right? We're using it at most maybe to run an operating system and have some fast boot times, but we're not using it to store major data sets at this point, or data sets that need to persist for some length of time.
Right, yeah. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up all the graphical content and projects that we had to show you guys, unless you have additional insight, Christian.
No, I mean, I think the takeaway is go download that kit, right? At least get connected to the Twitter. It's not so important that you need to necessarily have a a Hadoop cluster to start looking at it, but even if you just work at it within your Java workbench, you're going to understand the concepts, and you can do some smaller scale stuff that is still a pretty meaningful project, in my opinion, for what you can do with this stuff. And I think that's valuable to understanding the field, especially if this might not be your full-time, normal, everyday job, right? So again, take a look at that post. We're probably going to take a break from this particular project as we get back onto some more cybersecurity topics. Some interesting conversations around what's going on with some of the new cyber threats. There's been a lot of conversation around the Regen malware and so forth. So we'll probably have some more security-focused content in December. We'll be bringing back a special guest, Dr. Jim Pertolo, who was on our show number 3 or 4 maybe, and he and I are going to be talking some pretty interesting stuff pertaining to his field again, and a lot of people had great things to say about what he had to say on the show the last time, so we figured we'd get him back in here for the new year and have a conversation. So, and finally, I did manage to get word count working for the hashtags, and MTV stars indeed rose to the top as we expected. Technology and voice finale are other popular tags right now. Some of them are explicit, so we will filter accordingly.
Hashtag Cyber Frontiers is in there, isn't there?
Yeah, I wish.
I think that's like number 7 or something.
It's and Twitter After Dark. I got to figure out what that is, but apparently that's the thing. So again, I think I'm going to let this run all night and see what the trending topics were for this running 2-hour period. So I think that's a wrap other than that.
All right, sounds good. Well, Christian already alluded to the January, I should have known this up front, but the January, we're actually going to move that time slot of that January
19th.
interview. 19th?
Yep, at 5.
January 19th, we're going to move that in the afternoon so you can join us. We're just going to need to accommodate the guest. Next show will be December 22nd, and both Christian and Ashton will be home, so we'll get an opportunity to check in on them from home, and what's going on with school will be done. You guys will be.
Hopefully, we'll be able to get. I want to get maybe some of this code up on the website to share with you guys, and hopefully we can dedicate a little bit more time to putting some other stuff on the website during winter break. But the next 2 weeks are going to be pretty intense.
It's finals for you guys, so we don't anticipate anything but you guys getting. Your job is to get stuff done at school, so
yeah.
Get that done as well. And if you can't get enough of Christian and Ashton, they're both showing up this Thursday on Home Gadget Geeks. We're not going to talk big data. Ashton, is that still going to work for you?
Not talking about big data or Thursday? Both
Thursday.
Yeah, both of those are good.
This Thursday. Christian's going to join us. And we had originally started talking about some gadgets, some running gadgets. We'll talk about those, but we kind of want to focus around all the tech gadgets you need as a college student these days. It's probably time to come back around and refresh that. We talked a little bit about that with Mike Howard back in the fall, but we'll get it from the college student's perspective and build the list, all the gifts you need to get your college students at Christmas time. So, guys, be thinking about all the cool stuff, all the cool gadgets that you guys have to have there to make it on campus and make it work, and maybe even talk about or be ready to talk about some of the technology that the campus has deployed there to help you guys, just all the way from your credit card to the to the TERP. Is it a TERP card? Is that what it's called there?
I think it's called Student ID.
But don't. A TERP card would have been cooler.
Well, TERP Bucks is the money.
There we go.
And then Terrapin Express. They have different categories.
Oh, very good. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that on Thursday. So if you're watching the show, head over to Home Gadget Geeks on Thursday. Both these guys back on. No big data. We're going to talk about kind of tech gadgets that that you need to survive as a college student in America in 2014. Don't forget to use the Amazon link if you are purchasing here at Christmas time. Of course, that always helps us with the Average Guy Scholarship Fund, Tech Scholarship Fund. You can just do that. AverageGuy.tv/Amazon will get you there. If you haven't subscribed to Cyber Frontiers, we want you to do that. That would be awesome if you would do that. Head over to the AverageGuy.tv/subscribe, and all the feeds, audio, video small, video large, everything you need is over there. And we'd love to have you do that. The other thing we'd love to have you do is, since December is Rate Your Favorite Podcast Month, we'd love to have you, if you're an iTunes person, head over in iTunes and leave us some feedback there on the show. If you're doing it in Android, whatever, Stitcher or whatever your podcatcher of choice is, just leave us a review. Those are always nice. And December is Rate Your Favorite Podcast Month, so let's get that done while you are out there doing that. And then we are back in 2 weeks. 22nd, we're back with these guys coming in from home, and we will have another Cyber Frontiers for you. We want to thank you for coming out tonight and being a good part of the chat room. And if you haven't joined us live, every other Monday night, usually 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, you can get the up-to-date schedule. I always try to post the shows that are coming up out of the Average Guy event. And then you can get the most up-to-date. Guys, thanks for doing it, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Have a good one.